Two elderly friends were strolling through a garden in full bloom, where a joyous spring was awakening new life all around them. One was a senator, the other a member of the French Academy, both men of substance, imbued with wisdom, yet prone to a certain solemnity in their speech, distinguished and renowned figures. At first, they conversed about politics, exchanging views not on ideas but on men, for in this matter, personalities always take precedence over reason. Then they revisited a host of memories and fell silent, continuing to walk side by side, softened by the warmth of the spring air. A lush bed of stocks exhaled a sweet and delicate fragrance. A multitude of flowers of every kind and hue mingled their perfumes on the gentle breeze, while a broom plant, laden with yellow blossoms, scattered upon the air its finest dust. A golden haze smelling of honey, diffusing its fragrant seeds like a perfumer's caressing powder. The senator halted, inhaled this fertile, volatile cloud, gazed at the amorous tree, radiant as the sun, whose seeds were flying off in every direction, and remarked, "To think that these barely perceptible, fragrant particles will become the origin of new life hundreds of leagues from here, will stir a tremor in the fibers and sap of female trees, and give rise to new beings, born from a seed, just like us mortals, beings who, like us, will always be replaced by other, similar creatures." Then, pausing before the radiant broom plant, whose life-giving fragrance grew stronger with every puff of wind, the senator added, "Ah, my friend, if one were to try and count one's children, one would find oneself in a most awkward predicament. But this creature here bears them without effort, abandons them without remorse, and gives them no further thought." The academician observed, "We do much the same, my friend." The senator objected, "True, I won't deny we sometimes abandon them, but at least we are aware of it, and therein lies our superiority." But his companion shook his head. "No, I mean something else. You see, my dear fellow, there is hardly a man who does not have children unknown to him, so-called children of unknown fatherhood, created by him, much like this tree creates, almost unconsciously. If we were to list all the women we have possessed, would we not find ourselves, would we not, in no less difficulty than this broom plant, were it to try and count its progeny? From the age of 18 to 40, taking into account all chance encounters, all fleeting liaisons, one might reasonably assume we have been intimately acquainted with 200 or even 300 women. So, are you so sure, my friend, that you did not impregnate at least one among this multitude? That you do not have somewhere, in the streets or in a penal colony, a wayward son who robs and murders honest folk? Meaning you and me? That you do not have a daughter in some den of vice, or, if she was lucky and her mother abandoned her, working as a cook in some stranger's household? Consider, too, that nearly all women we call public have one, even 2 children, whose fathers they do not know, conceived by chance and embraces paid for with 10 or 20 francs. In every trade, one counts profits and losses. These offspring constitute the loss in their mother's profession. Who are their fathers? You, all of us so-called respectable men. They are the fruits of our carefree, friendly dinners, our merry evenings, those hours when our satiated flesh draws us to fleeting encounters. Thieves, vagabonds, in short, all the dregs of society, are, in the final analysis, our children. And it is also our good fortune that they are not our fathers, for those scoundrels, in their turn, beget offspring. Now listen. Personally, I have on my conscience a most unpleasant story, which I will recount to you. For me, it is a source of unceasing remorse and, moreover, a source of constant doubt and perpetual uncertainty, which at times torments me cruelly. I was 25 years old when, together with my friend, who is now a high-ranking official, I undertook a walking tour through Brittany. After 2 or 3 weeks of continuous walking, having passed through Côtes du Nord and part of Finistère, we finally reached Douarnenez. From there, in a single day's march, we attained the desolate Point du Raz. Having crossed the Bay of Trapasses, we spent the night in a small village with a name ending in off. The next morning, a strange lassitude kept my companion in bed. I say in bed out of habit, for this time our couch consisted of nothing but 2 bundles of straw. To fall ill in such a place was unthinkable. I compelled him to get up, and by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, we had reached Audierne. The next day, he felt a little better. We set off again. But on the road, he was overcome by a sudden, severe malaise, and we barely managed to drag ourselves to Pont-à-l'Abbé. There at least we found an inn. My friend took to his bed, and a doctor, summoned from Quimper, diagnosed a violent fever, though he could not yet determine its nature. Do you know Pont-à-l'Abbé? No. Well, it is the most Breton town in all of this, the most Breton part of Brittany, which stretches from the Point du Raz to the Morbihan, a region that represents the very quintessence of Breton customs, legends, and traditions. To this day, this corner of the land remains almost unchanged. I say to this day, for I now return there, alas, every year. The old castle bathes the foot of its towers in the waters of a vast and profoundly melancholy lake, over which flocks of wild birds endlessly wheel. A river flows from it, navigable by small craft all the way up to the town. Through the narrow streets, between ancient houses, stroll men in broad-brimmed hats, embroidered waistcoats, and multiple jackets worn one over the other. The top one, no larger than a hand, barely covers their shoulder blades, while the bottom one reaches down to their breeches. The girls there, tall, shapely, and fresh-complexioned, wear woolen waistcoats like cuirasses that constrict their bosoms so tightly one cannot even see the nape of their necks. They dress their hair in a peculiar fashion. At the temples, 2 brightly embroidered discs frame the face. The hair is drawn back in a wave and then gathered at the crown of the head under a distinctive coif, often woven with threads of gold or silver. The maid at the inn was no more than 18. Her blue, very pale blue eyes were pierced by the black points of her pupils, and her small, close-set teeth, which she constantly revealed when she laughed, seemed created for crushing granite. She did not know a word of French and, like most of her compatriots, spoke only Breton. My friend did not recover, and although no specific illness was discovered, the doctor forbade him to continue the journey for the time being, prescribing absolute rest. Thus, I spent entire days at his bedside, while the young maid came into our room incessantly, now with a meal for me, now with a drink for the patient. I teased her lightly, which she seemed to enjoy, but of course we never conversed, as we could not understand each other. Then, one night, having stayed late by my friend's bedside, I was on my way to my room when I met the young girl going to hers. It was directly opposite my open door. Suddenly, without thinking what I was doing, more in jest than in earnest, I seized her by the waist, and, before she could recover from her astonishment, thrust her into my room and locked the door. She looked at me, frightened, stunned with terror, not daring to cry out for fear of a scandal, afraid, it seemed at first, of her employers, and then, perhaps, of her father. I had done it for a laugh, but once she was in my room, I was seized by a desire to possess her. What followed was a long and silent struggle, a body-to-body combat, like that of wrestlers. Our arms strained, clenched convulsively, twisted. Our skin grew damp with sweat. Oh, how stubbornly she defended herself. At times we stumbled against a partition, a chair, or some other piece of furniture. Then, without loosening our grip, we would freeze for a few seconds, fearing the noise might wake someone, only to resume our furious struggle, I attacking, she defending. Finally, she fell exhausted. I took her roughly there on the floor. As soon as she got up, she rushed to the door, drew back the bolt, and fled. In the days that followed, I scarcely saw her. She would not let me near her. When my companion had fully recovered and we were ready to continue our journey, on the night before our departure, around midnight, she entered my room, where I had just retired, barefoot and wearing only her shift. She threw herself upon me, clasped me in a passionate embrace, and until dawn she covered me with kisses, caressed me, wept and sobbed, proving her desperate love to me by all the means available to a woman who did not know a single word of our language. Within a week, I had forgotten this adventure, so commonplace and frequent on the road. After all, inn servants, by the very nature of their lot, are meant to provide solace to travelers. For 30 years, I did not recall that incident, nor did I return to Panama Bay. In 1876, I found myself there again by chance, while touring Brittany to gather material for a book and to immerse myself in the landscapes of that region. Nothing, it seemed, had changed. The castle still bathed its grayish walls in the waters of the lake at the town's entrance. The inn was the same, though it had been refurbished, renovated, and now catered more to modern tastes. Upon entering, I was greeted by two young Breton women of about 18, fresh-faced and pretty, encased in the armor of their woolen waistcoats, their coifs embroidered with silver, with large embroidered discs covering their ears. It was about 6 in the evening. I sat down at a table to await my dinner, and as the innkeeper was quite insistent on serving me himself, some fatal curiosity prompted me to ask, "Did you know the previous owners of this house?" "I stayed here for a few days some 30 years ago. I speak of a distant past." He replied, "They were my parents, sir." I then told them under what circumstances I had stopped here back then, due to my companion's illness. He did not let me finish. "Ah, yes, I remember it perfectly. I was 15 or 16 at the time. Your room was at the back, and your friend lay ill in the room where I live now, the one that faces the street." It was then that the image of the young servant girl vividly resurfaced in my mind. I inquired, "And do you recall a comely girl who worked for your father then?" If my memory serves, she had delightful blue eyes and dazzling teeth. He said, "Yes, sir. She died in childbirth soon after your departure." And, pointing out into the yard where a thin, lame man was cleaning manure, he added, "That is her son." I laughed. "Well, he is ill-favored and not at all like his mother. No doubt he takes after his father." The innkeeper said, "Perhaps, but who his father was remained a mystery. She died without revealing it, and no one here ever knew of her lover. Everyone was stunned when it was discovered she was with child. No one wanted to believe it. An unpleasant shudder ran through me, and my heart constricted as if with a premonition of misfortune. I looked at the man in the yard. He had just drawn water for the horses and was carrying 2 buckets, hobbling painfully on his lame leg. His clothes were in tatters, and he was disgustingly filthy. His long, yellow hair was matted into clumps that hung over his cheeks like ropes. The innkeeper added, "He's good for nothing. He was kept on out of pity. Perhaps he might have turned out better, raised like others. But what can one do, sir? No father, no mother, not a penny to his name. My parents took pity on the child, but of course he was not their own." I remained silent. I went to bed in my old room and spent the whole night pondering this dreadful stable hand, repeating to myself, what if this is my son? Can it be that I destroyed that girl and spawned such a creature? After all, it was possible. I decided to speak with this man and ascertain the exact date of his birth. A difference of even 2 months would have dispelled my doubts. The next morning, I had him summoned, but he did not understand a word of French either. Moreover, he had the air of someone who comprehends nothing at all. When one of the maids, at my request, asked him his age, he did not even know that. He stood before me with an idiotic expression, kneading his cap in his hands with his ugly, knotted fingers and grinning mindlessly, though a shadow of his mother's smile lingered in the corners of his eyes and lips. The innkeeper, who had come over, found a wretch's birth certificate. He had been born 8 months and 26 days after my stay in Pont-l'Abbé. I remembered perfectly that I had left for Lorient on the 15th of August. The document stated, "Father unknown." The mother's name was Jean Caradec. My heart began to beat rapidly. I could no longer speak, so suffocated was I by emotion. I stared at this wretch, whose long, yellow hair seemed filthier than the straw in a stable. Discomfited by my gaze, the ragged man stopped grinning, averted his eyes, and hurried away. I spent the rest of that day wandering along the river, given over to sorrowful reflection. But to what end? I could settle nothing. For hours I weighed all the arguments for and against my paternity, tormenting myself with futile conjectures and returning to the same horrible uncertainty, or to the even more terrible conviction that this man was my son. That evening, I could not dine and retired to my room. I tossed and turned for a long time before sleep finally overcame me, a sleep full of unbearable visions. I dreamed of that repulsive sloven, laughing in my face and calling me Papa. Then he turned into a dog, bit my legs, and wherever I fled, he followed me, but instead of barking, he showered me with abuse. Then he appeared before my colleagues at the academy, gathered to decide if I was indeed his father, and one of them exclaimed, "There is no doubt. Look, what a striking resemblance." And indeed, I noticed myself that this monster resembled me. I awoke with this thought rooted in my mind, and with a painful craving to see the man again, to ascertain whether he truly looked like me. I caught up with him as he was going to Mass. It was Sunday, and I thrust 100 sous into his hand, studying him furtively. He gave that disgusting laugh again, took the coins, and, discomfited by my intense gaze, scurried off, muttering some incomprehensible word, probably meant as "thank you." I spent the day in anguish, no less than the day before. Towards evening, I summoned the innkeeper and, resorting to guile, told him with the utmost caution that I had been moved to pity for this unfortunate creature, abandoned and deprived by all, and that I wished to do something for him. But the proprietor objected. "Ah, sir, give up the idea. He's good for nothing, and you'll only bring trouble upon yourself. I make him clean the stables. It's the only thing he can do. For that, I feed him, and he sleeps with the horses. He needs nothing more. If you have an old pair of trousers, give them to him, but they'll be in tatters within a week." I did not insist, deciding to think it over. That evening, the cripple returned dead drunk, nearly set the house on fire, injured a horse with a shovel, and, to cap it all, collapsed asleep in a puddle in the rain. all thanks to my generosity. The next day, I was asked to give him no more money. Brandy drove him mad, and the moment a couple of sous found their way into his pocket, he immediately drank them away. The innkeeper added, "Giving him money is tantamount to wishing him dead." The stable hand never had a cent, save for the few centimes tossed to him by travelers, and he knew no other purpose for coin than the tavern. After that conversation, I spent long hours in my room with an open book in my hands, pretending to read, while in reality doing nothing but gazing at that animal. My son, and vainly trying to discern in him some resemblance to myself. In the end, I fancied something common in the lines of his forehead and the bridge of his nose, and soon I became convinced that a likeness existed between us, one that was merely obscured by the man's disgusting mane and rags. I could not stay longer without arousing suspicion, and I left with a broken heart, leaving a little money with the innkeeper to slightly brighten the harsh existence of his stable hand. And for 6 years now, I have lived with this thought, in this horrifying uncertainty, with this loathsome doubt. And every year an irresistible force draws me back to Pont-à-l'Abbé. Annually, I condemn myself to the torture of watching that creature slosh through the manure, of imagining he resembles me, and of devising, always fruitlessly, ways to help him. And each time I return from there, even more tormented by doubt and anguish. I try to educate him. He is a hopeless idiot. I try to make his life easier. He is an incurable drunkard who drinks away everything he gets. Moreover, he is adept at selling new clothes to get money for drink. I tried to appeal to the innkeeper's compassion, urging him to take better care of his groom, and I constantly offered him money for this purpose. The innkeeper finally replied to me, quite sensibly, "Anything you do for him, sir, will only lead to his ruin. He must be treated like a convict. The moment he has any leisure or money, he becomes dangerous. If you wish to do good, look elsewhere. There is no shortage of abandoned children, but choose one who would justify your care." What could I say to that? If the doubts that torment me were to become suspicious in the eyes of others, this Cretan would doubtless use all his low cunning to exploit me, to disgrace and ruin me. He would shout "Papa" at me as in my nightmare. And I confessed to myself that I had destroyed the mother and doomed this stunted creature, this stable-born larva reared on manure, a man who, had he been raised like others, might have become no worse than them. You cannot imagine the strange, vague, and unbearable feeling that takes hold of me at the sight of him, when I think that he is my own flesh and blood, that we are bound by the closest ties uniting father and son, that by the terrible laws of heredity he is me in 1,000 ways, that within him lie the same germs of disease, the same seeds of passion. I am incessantly gnawed by a tormenting, insatiable need to see him, and the sight of him causes me inexpressible suffering. From my window, I watch for hours as he turns over and carts horse manure, and I repeat to myself, "That is my son," and at times I am seized by an intolerable desire to embrace and kiss him. But I have never once touched his grimy hand. The academician fell silent, and his companion, the statesman, murmured softly, "Yes, indeed, we ought to take a little more interest in children who grow up without fathers." A gust of wind swept through the garden. The broom plant swayed its yellow clusters and enveloped the 2 old men in a fine, fragrant cloud, which they breathed in deeply. And the senator added, "And yet, how good it is to be 25 and to beget children, even such as these."